This is Indian Territory by Nicholas Manchester. Read to you by the author. 7 Kaw warriors, an Arapaho hunter, and an American Army officer trotted single file, with nothing but open fields surrounding them. The only thing that wasn't wild grass was one strip of dirt behind them that stretched to Santa Fe from Fort Leavenworth. Sergeant Thomas Crawford glanced back with infrequent intervals at the road known as the Santa Fe Trail, each time seeing it further from view until it was beyond the horizon. "Hey," Crawford whispered, trying to get the attention of the Arapaho named Wotanach 10 feet in front of him. He yanked on the rope that bound their wrists together. "Leave me alone, white man," said the Arapaho. "Can you ask him to give us some water?" asked Crawford with a harsh whisper. "No." "Why not?" "They will beat you. Then they will beat me just for asking." "Why will they beat you? You're an Indian like them." "I'm Arapaho. They're Kaw. We're not the same kind of Indian." "But you've been talking to them this whole time." "I'm talking to you now. Does that make me a white man?" The leader of the Kaw band stopped, causing those behind to do the same. He turned and walked over to Crawford. Apart from his broad-brimmed hat, the flintlock musket slung around his shoulder, and Crawford's boots on his feet, he dressed in traditional Kaw attire of beads and animal hide. He took Crawford and spoke to him under his breath. Crawford was stupefied, leading the Kaw warrior to repeat himself. The sergeant still didn't understand, but would not get a third opportunity to respond. The Kaw stomped over to Wotanach and yelled a question to him. The Arapaho understood the inquiry, but tried to deflect it. This was to no avail, as the Kaw swung his musket to strike Wotanach's torso. The Arapaho finally appeared to answer the question, and the Kaw warrior looked back at Crawford. He turned and swung his rifle back at the Arapaho, who used his arms to block the blow. The warrior swung his musket around and struck the Arapaho in the back of the knee, sending him crumpling to the ground, screaming. The Kaw yelled a command, which prompted one of the other warriors to bring a bladder full of water. The leader walked over to Crawford, bladder in hand, and while maintaining eye contact, poured the entire contents of the bladder on the ground. He gestured to the ground, permitting Crawford to drink. Crawford stood still. The Kaw slung his rifle back over his shoulder and moved to the front of the group. Everyone else resumed their hike, except Wotanach, who couldn't walk and was hoisted onto the back of a horse. Crawford looked behind him one more time, unable to make out the Santa Fe Trail. Days before Crawford marched through Indian Territory, wrists bound and at knife point, he rode out from Fort Leavenworth on the Santa Fe Trail with his team. Sergeant Crawford, Corporal Dunning, Corporal Hastings, and Corporal Lang, a 6-hour ride west from the United States proper, investigated a column of smoke they had spotted from the trail. All 4 dismounted when they arrived at the campsite where the smoldering ashes released the smoke into the air. There was an empty bedroll, but no other evidence of human activity aside from the fire. "There's no one here," said Crawford. "Yes, but there was someone here," said Dunning. "Perhaps Mr. Auerbach's assailants are resting here." "There's only one bedroll here. Minimal disturbance. There's only one person here." "The Indians are light travelers, Sergeant, as well as stealthy journeymen. This could be the work of a whole band." Hastings yelped, prompting Crawford to turn around. He saw Hastings, a knife pressed to his throat by an Indian. Crawford raised both hands in the air, while Dunning and Lang fanned out and aimed their muskets at the assailant. "Hold your fire!" Crawford shouted. To the attacker, he said, "Let's remain calm. Do you speak English?" "Yes," said the Indian. "Let's remain calm. What you're doing right now is assaulting a military officer, which could land you in a heap of trouble. It's a felony in this country." We're in Indian territory, and I'm an Indian."
"This is sovereign territory of the United States," shouted Dunning.
"Enough, Dunning." "Sir," said Lang, "I have the shot."
"Don't shoot," said Hastings. "Hold your fire," Crawford said to Lang.
To the Indian he said,
"Let's strike a deal."
"I know better," said the Indian, "than to trust a deal with the U.S. Army."
"How about a deal between you and I, man to man?
We're just looking for a lost traveler. If you release Corporal Hastings and help us find Mr. Auerbach, then we can all go our separate ways."
"I can take the shot," said Lang. "I said hold your fire, damn it," said Crawford.
Turning his attention back to the Indian, he asked,
"Do we have a deal?"
"Will you escort me back to Fort Leavenworth when we're finished?" he said.
"What business do you have at Fort Leavenworth?" asked Dunning. "Hold your fire and hold your tongue," commanded Crawford.
"I'm making my way to Independence," said the Indian.
"If you help us locate our abductee, then we will escort you to Fort Leavenworth, where you may continue on to whichever destination you wish." "Permission to speak, sir," said Dunning. "Concerning what?" asked Crawford. "The terms of the deal." "There's nothing wrong with the deal," yelled Hastings. "What are your concerns?" asked Crawford. "Frankly, sir, I don't trust him," said Dunning. "I fear he may turn on us or sell us out to his other Indian friends."
"I'm Arapaho," said the Indian. "We're in the middle of Kaw territory. I have no more friends here than you."
"All the same," said Dunning, "if you insist on striking a deal, I would feel more comfortable if he were restrained while assisting us in our search."
"No deal," said the Indian. "Sir," said Lang, "I can take the shot. Since he attacked a U.S. citizen, you can authorize it."
"I only attacked him because you tried to sneak up on me."
"I'm afraid he's right," said Crawford.
"If you don't agree to our terms, then we will have to treat you as hostile."
"Do it," said Hastings.
"Take the deal."
The Indian pressed the knife harder against Hastings' neck. The young officer writhed in the Indian's grip. The Indian weighed his options, then let go of his victim. Hastings ran behind Crawford.
"I can take the shot now," said Lang. "Lang, if you don't lower your rifle, I'll tie you up along with him," said Crawford.
And so they rode, each man atop his own horse. The Indian rode with his wrists tied to Dunning's saddle, while his horse was hitched to Lang's. Crawford rode out in front, while Hastings rode in the back, never taking his eyes off the Indian. If the Indian had turned around to startle Hastings, he would have leapt out of his stirrups. No one spoke for hours. The journey would have been silent, save for the stomping of hooves on the dirt road and the wind rustling the grass across the plains. Mule deer, buzzards, and groundhogs were the only things living with which the team intersected. After many hours, Crawford decided to stop and set up camp for the night. They found a creek, shot a few ducks, and cooked the fowl over an open fire.
"Did you see any signs of our quarry?"
asked Crawford as they ate. "I saw none," said the Indian. "What did you say he was wearing again?"
"A Tyroler hat. A traditional German hat."
"What does that look like?"
"It's a funny-looking green hat." "What's a German doing in the Indian Territory?" asked Dunning between swigs of his homemade corn whiskey. "He was going to Santa Fe, I suppose," said Crawford. "What was the fellow's name?" "Karl Auerbach."
Crawford turned to the Indian, abruptly ending his conversation with Dunning.
"Remind me what your name is again," he said.
"I didn't tell you my name," said the Indian.
"How come?"
"You didn't ask."
"Then consider this an official inquiry."
"You wouldn't be able to say it."
"Nonsense," blurted Dunning. "Your name's gonna be something like White Half-Oat."
"You're thinking of what my name translates into English. Americans do that because they can't pronounce them. What's your name?"
"Philip."
"What does that mean?"
"One who loves horses."
"From now on, I'm going to call you Horse Lover."
Crawford and Hastings both laughed, while Lang concealed his amusement.
Dunning stood up and rushed over to the Indian, fists cocked.
Crawford stood up and intercepted him. "Sit down, Dunning," he said. "That Indian is making a mockery of me. said Dunning. "We need his help. You can't hit him." "I will not have my honor besmirched by an unwashed heathen. Dunning, sit down. That's an order."
Dunning stared at Crawford, fuming.
"Why are you taking his side?" "The side I'm on is the side of the American people, including Mary Auerbach, who asked us to help find her husband. I will not have you harm one who assists us on this mission. Is that understood?"
Dunning stared at Crawford again, and then turned and walked into his tent. Crawford sat back down, and the rest of the team finished their meal in silence. Lang and Hastings both retired, leaving Crawford and the Indian sitting and staring into the fire.
"Wotanach," the Indian said.
"What?" asked Crawford.
"Wotanach. That's my name. Wotanach."
"What does it mean?" "I was named after my father. He was a great warrior who died fighting the Comanche."
"But what does it mean?"
"Names are sacred. I won't diminish my name by telling you the meaning." The two stared at the fire for a few more minutes, until Crawford was ready to retire.
"Shall I untie you?"
he asked Wotanach. "Untie me."
"Unless you want to sleep in your restraints."
"Do you trust me? Don't you think I'll scalp you in your sleep?"
"I know you want my help with something. I can't take you to Fort Leavenworth without a scalp."
"Then I would like to be untied."
"Very well. Just don't tell the men."
The next morning, the morning of the day of their capture at the hands of the Kaw, Crawford tied the bonds around Wotanach's hands, not knowing they would not be removed until well after the impending Kaw capture. The gang of 4 army officers and 1 Indian set out as the sun peeked over the horizon. In only a few short hours, the sun imposed its fiery presence without a cloud in the sky to intercept the unforgiving rays. No one spoke, and when the horses stopped, so that one of its riders may evacuate the morning's brew, they could hear the grass stalks knocking against each other under the pressure of the western breeze. The longer they rode, the more Wotanach felt the rope chafing his wrists. "Sergeant," he said at last, from the middle of the train.
"Silence," said Dunning.
"Shut your trap, Dunning," said Crawford, turning around to face him.
"That's an order."
"I request to be untied, Sergeant," said Wotanach.
"Permission to speak?"
said Dunning.
"Permission denied,"
said Crawford.
"You already made your thoughts abundantly clear."
"Sergeant," said Wotanach, "my wrists are starting to blister. We are only a few dozen yards away from that river. You may not be able to see it, but there is a short valley just over there with a river running through it. I crossed that river on my way here. I want to take these ropes off and cool in the river."
"Permission to speak, sir," said Dunning.
Crawford's horse wheeled around so that the sergeant was facing his men. All of the horses stopped immediately. He caught a glimpse of Wotanach, who was studying the landscape behind Crawford's shoulder. Crawford forgot about the tongue lashing he was about to release upon Dunning, and instead studied Wotanach's expression. "Do you hear that?" Wotanach said.
"Hear what?"
asked Crawford. Wotanach quickly turned to Crawford. "Untie me."
"What?"
"Untie me, now."
"Why?"
"I hear horses."
"I don't hear no horses," said Lang.
"They're in the valley, out of sight. I can hear hoofs echoing. It's getting louder. Untie me." Crawford turned around and looked to the horizon. Just as he turned, he saw a horse spring up from somewhere below the horizon, followed by another and another.
"That Indian led us into a trap,"
yelled Dunning.
"No," said Wotanach. "They're Kaw or Pawnee. I'm Arapaho."
Dunning pulled out his rifle and aimed at Wotanach.
"The Indian led us into a trap. I gotta kill him."
"I couldn't have set a trap. I was with you the whole time."
"Maybe you sneaked out last night."
"Wasn't he tied up the whole time?" asked Hastings.
"No,"
said Crawford, turning back to his men.
"What do you mean?"
asked Dunning.
"I untied him last night."
"You untied him, Sarge?" "Sergeant," Wotanach said, "you know this isn't a trap. Please, Tell Dunning to stop aiming at me and aim at them." "What did you do last night?" asked Crawford. "I slept." "Sarge, let me put a bullet in him," said Dunning. Crawford paused. During that brief moment, that half second, a volley of arrows landed. Dunning absorbed one to his right clavicle and toppled off his horse. Another arrow flew past Crawford and struck Wotanok's horse in the ribs. Wotanok went down, his body slamming against the Santa Fe trail. Crawford dismounted and ducked under Wotanok's fallen steed. "Give me a gun," said the Arapaho, legs pinned under his horse. Crawford looked at him, but said nothing. "Be serious," said Wotanok. "We are under attack. Give me a gun." Crawford, behind the cover of the horse, faced his rifle around and fired off several shots, taking down 2 assailants. He looked around at his men. Dunning was on the ground, writhing in pain, an arrow disabling his right arm from the shoulder down. Hastings had fallen off his horse and lay motionless in the dirt. Lang was the only one still on his horse. A crack caused Crawford to flinch as a musket ball whizzed past. Though the weapon itself was outdated, the marksman's aim rang true, and Lang was dead before he hit the ground. Mere seconds later, the Kaw attackers were upon them, circling the gang of American soldiers, among whom only Crawford was capable of fighting back. The attackers stopped and aimed their arrows at Crawford, who threw down his rifle. The Kaw tied Crawford to Wotanok, who they pulled out from under his mount. They walked to Hastings and Lang and finished off what was left of them. Finally, they walked over to Dunning and relieved him of his scalp. Crawford slept under a black sky ablaze with stars, waking when he felt a soft kick to his calves. He rolled over to see Wotanok staring at him. "White man," he said, "the watchman just fell asleep. We can go, but my leg hurts. I need your help." "Why should I help you?" asked Crawford. "Because your other choices are staying with the Kaw or making your way back on your own. If you would rather follow either path, then go ahead. If not, then help me up." As quietly as he could, Crawford stood up, then helped his Arapaho companion. "We need a knife and a horse," said Wotanok. "I won't be able to get far on my feet." Crawford made his way to the makeshift post where the Kaw had tied up their horses. He untied one and led it to a spot right outside the campsite where Wotanok had hobbled over and helped him mount. "Now a knife," said Wotanok. Crawford slunk back into camp in search of a knife to cut his bonds. He found the place where the leader of the Kaw band was sleeping. After he'd cut the rope from his hands, he untied a horse for himself and trotted to where Wotanok was waiting. "What is that?" Wotanok whispered. "Leave the guns." "No," replied Crawford, handing Wotanok the knife. "If you shoot, they'll hear you from miles away." "I don't care. I'm taking the guns." Wotanok didn't want the distraction of an argument to get in the way of their escape, so the two left, guiding the horses away slowly to quiet the sound of their hooves. The night was quiet, and the resonance of the hooves drowned out the sound of the slight breeze blowing north to south. Only a few moments of trotting had passed before Wotanok quickly stopped. Crawford stopped as well, and, having passed his co-traveler, turned back to meet him. "Do you hear that?" asked Wotanok. "No," said Crawford. He looked around, but could only see stars. But something clearly bothered Wotanok, so Crawford gave the landscape another glance. A second perusal of the landscape revealed dual reflections in the distance from the south. 2 small glints of light at first appeared to be stars themselves. Then Crawford noticed an identical pair of reflecting dots. He then noticed a third and a fourth, followed by a noise that made his blood freeze inside his veins. "I heard it that time," he said. "A howl." "Let's go," said Wotanok. Crawford didn't need any convincing. He helped Wotanok onto his horse, and the two sent their horses into a gallop. The reflective eyes of the wolves followed them, As the wolves approached closer and closer, Crawford could make out their shadowy lupine forms, matching the horse's stride for stride. He clocked 4 or 5 wolves on his right side, and then suddenly, his horse was attacked from the left. Crawford went down with a thud, thankful for the soft grass that absorbed his impact. Wotanok's horse reared up, but he did not have the strength to stay on. He also fell into the grass. While one of the wolves was hard at work on Crawford's horse, the rest circled the 2 travelers. Crawford felt around until his hands landed on his musket. He raised his gun to his eyes and aimed at the closest wolf. A loud crack split the night air, resounding around Crawford in every direction. He missed the wolf, but it didn't matter. The pack scattered at the sound of the rifle's discharge. Crawford looked behind him through the lingering musket smoke. At the Kaws camp to the west, small fires danced around to the music of frantic shouts. They were awake. "We have to go south," said Wotanok. "No, we have to go east," said Crawford. "Now you smell like gunpowder, so we have to go with the wind." Wotanok put his arm around Crawford, and the 2 hurried like contestants in a 3-legged race. Crawford looked back and could see the group of Indians mounted in pursuit. "They're coming after us," said Crawford. "Yes," said Wotanok, "because you woke them with your musket." Crawford kept running, though at half of a sprint so that his hobbled companion could keep up. He knew they wouldn't be able to outrun their Kaw captors. He looked behind again. "They're getting closer," he said. "Keep going," grunted Wotanok. When it sounded like horseback hunters might get close enough to see the escapees, the wolf pack returned to intercept them. Crawford turned straight ahead and focused all of his energy on moving as fast as he could. While his legs were in better condition than Wotanok's, he still felt bruises around his torso from his beatings and falls from horseback over the last 24 hours. Every time he breathed, it felt like his lungs slammed against the inside of his ribs. Over the heavy breathing and grunting, Crawford could hear howling, horses, neighing, and even a gunshot. Suddenly, Wotanok collapsed, dragging Crawford down with him. The 2 just lay on the ground, sucking air into their lungs and pushing it back out. Once their breathing leveled out, Crawford pushed himself into a seated position. He searched the horizon for an imminent rush of mounted Kaw warriors, but none appeared. The wolves must have been too much for them, Crawford supposed. "Did the wolves save us?" asked Crawford. "For now," said Wotanok. "But the Kaw know how to defend against wolves. They won't be defeated for long." Crawford continued to breathe, allowing his gasps to slow the more he inhaled. "They're coming back," said Wotanok. Crawford looked again for the Indians, but realized Wotanok was talking about hunters of a different variety when he heard howling. "Help me up," Wotanok said. Crawford stood and pulled him to his feet. Crawford started to pull the Arapaho's arm across his shoulders, but Wotanok resisted. "No," he said. "Stand here." Wotanok positioned himself so the 2 were standing back to back. "Let's get out of here," Crawford said. "No, stand here and look straight ahead." Wotanok squatted down and grabbed a stone. "You still have that musket?" he asked. "Yes," said Crawford. "I might have some ammunition in this pouch." "Don't. Let the wolves circle us, and if one comes at you, hit it with the musket." "Are you sure? I think I should fire off a round and we'll make a break for it. How did that work out for us last time? If we run, they'll just run us down. We have to stand here and fight. Trust me." As the wolf pack approached, Crawford took a second to weigh his options. Deciding to trust Wotanok, he grabbed the end of the muzzle so he could better swing his musket. The wolves circled. One started to approach Wotanok, but he threw his stone and hit the wolf in the snout. The wolf backed away, and another attacked Crawford. He swung his musket and hit the wolf on the side of the head. The pack probed one more time, coming at Wotanok. All he had was a knife, but he slashed the attacking wolf's outstretched paw. The wolf squealed, and the rest of the pack ran off into the night. The ground vibrated steadily underneath until Crawford awoke at the base of a walnut tree. He had hiked during the night with Wotanok until the 2 had found a pond with a small grove of trees surrounding it. The two travelers, overcome with exhaustion, had finally found refuge and slept. Crawford wanted to remain asleep, but the rumbling of the ground grew and grew. When he realized he would not be able to sleep anymore, he got up and looked around. Crawford looked around for a tempest, but there was not a cloud in the cerulean sky. To the west rolled a brown ocean, dust rising from the torrential undertow. The waves approached closer and closer as the vibration grew louder and louder. Crawford turned to Wotanok, who had propped himself up on his elbows. "Help me up," he said to Crawford. The sergeant grabbed his hand and pulled him up to his feet. Wotanok hopped on his left foot until he was under the lowest branch on the walnut tree. He jumped, grabbed a branch, and pulled himself up without the use of his legs. Crawford passed him their knife, musket, and pouch, the only possessions they had. Crawford then grabbed the branch and swung his leg around to boost himself up. From the west, a herd of buffalo advanced closer. The stampede reminded Crawford of the Mississippi River after a rainstorm, both in volume and strength of current. The herd passed by underneath their tree, and Crawford watched in amazement. Each creature was as large as any ox he'd ever seen, and as skillful a runner as a thoroughbred horse. Though Wotanok was on the same branch, sitting less than a yard away, he could have yelled something at the top of his lungs and Crawford wouldn't have been able to hear. For minutes on end, perhaps even an hour, the American bison charged underneath the foliage. Crawford held on as tight as he could for fear of the vibrations shaking him off his branch. The torrent finally turned into a trickle until the last of the great bovines passed by. Crawford and Wotanok lowered themselves to the ground. The grass underneath was crushed, and the impressions of thousands, if not millions, of hoofprints pocked the ground. Crawford looked to Wotanok, who was smiling. "What?" asked Crawford. "Was that your first buffalo stampede? We don't have a lot of buffalo out east." "Now that we're awake, we should start moving." "Moving where?" "North. There's a creek they call Jabe that will lead us to the Kansas River, which will take us to Independence. Then you can go back to Fort Leavenworth, and I'll keep going." Crawford watched Wotanok hobble to the pond and get a drink of water. "No, we should stay here," said Crawford. "That's a bad idea," said Wotanok. "We need to go north." "You're in no condition to walk all the way to Independence. Let's stay here and hunt buffalo and wait for someone to find us." "We can't hunt buffalo." "Why not?" "We can't eat all that meat. We can't tan the hides. It wouldn't be right." "What are we supposed to do? Eat walnuts?" "It doesn't matter anyways. We can't stay here." "Why not? Someone will find us." "Who?" "Trappers? The army? Or the Kaw?" Crawford paused for a moment to collect his thoughts. "We can't keep running, you know," said Crawford. "Not with your leg." "I'll push through," said Wotanok. "As an officer in the United States Army, I order you to stay here." "You're giving me orders? We wouldn't even be in this situation if you hadn't let us get captured." "Think about your next words carefully, Indian." "Are my words untrue? Why didn't you untie me and give me a gun when we were attacked?" "Because you trusted that half-wit Dunning." "Watch what you're saying. Dunning was a great soldier who died in the line of duty." "Dunning was a fool. Surely you realize by now that I never did anything to harm any of you. I willingly allowed myself to be your captive. Yet when the Kaw attacked us, you were more concerned with me than you were with them. But you..." Crawford couldn't find the end of that sentence. "You thought," said Wotanok, "that I was just another Indian. I thought you were different, but you're just another white man. So why don't you stay here and live off the buffalo and fight off the Kaw when they find you, and I'll find the Jabe Creek and make my way to Missouri." Wotanok limped past Crawford, heading north. He only made it a few yards before Crawford went after him. "Wait," Crawford said, catching up in only a few strides. "Look, I know you don't like me, but you need me. And as much as I hate to admit it, I need you too. You can't walk far without me, and I need your knowledge of the land. So let's stick together. We may not like it, but it's the only chance we have to survive."
How do I know you won't do something foolish that gets us killed? We've survived all my foolishness so far. Look, I know I can't survive without you. Let's agree that we need to combine your brain and my able body. But if we do this, we have to make decisions together. How do we decide where to go next? We'll go north, like you said. Perhaps being a moving target will help keep the Ka off our trail. Then let's go. We have a lot of ground to cover.
The two walked across miles and miles of grasslands, appearing to an eagle as a shipwrecked sailor might appear to an albatross. Crawford had been trained for such exploration years ago, but his memories of his instruction had faded with the passing of the years. He was already exhausted from his travels, as the walking was plentiful while food, water, and sleep were scarce. Instinctually, he viewed the pond as a place where he could gain his strength, take a defensive position, and wait until he could be discovered. But the longer he walked, the more he realized that Wotanok was right. They needed to keep moving and avoid the raiding bands of Ka. While Wotanok couldn't walk as fast, Crawford wouldn't be able to survive on the frontier without the Arapaho. Wotanok was the navigator. Crawford was the beast of burden, and the two walked side by side. "To the left," said Wotanok. Crawford looked left. "I can't see anything," he said. "Try harder." After straining his eyes, he finally saw through the grassy camouflage and made out a canine figure with pointed ears and a narrow snout. "A wolf?" asked Crawford. "Not this time. A coyote." "How can you tell?" "A wolf runs with his tail pointed straight behind him, but a coyote runs with his tail pointed down." "Are we in danger of being attacked?" "No. He's by himself, so he probably wouldn't attack a grown man. He certainly wouldn't attack two." "How do you know?" Wotanok flinched. The idea that Crawford would question him after all they had been through was a surprising one. "Sorry," said Crawford. "I didn't mean anything by it. I'm just curious." "Well," said Wotanok, "I've seen coyotes many times before." "Where?" "Everywhere. Back where I was born in the western part of the Indian Territory, down in northern Mexico, up in Cheyenne and Lakota land." "You're quite the itinerant. Have you been to the United States proper?" "No, I've never been this far east before." Crawford stopped. "Then how do you know where we're going?" "I've talked to a lot of people. I know most of the mountains and rivers in the west, even though I haven't seen them all." "Who told you about the Jabe?" "The cause that kidnapped us." "You asked them for directions?" Wotanok laughed. "No, I overheard them talking about it." They continued walking. "Have you run into the Ka before?" asked Crawford. "This is the first time." "Then how do you speak their language?" "It's similar to the Lakota language." "How do you know English?" "I spent a lot of time around fur traders growing up." "Do you speak any other languages?" "Je parle français." "Some of those fur traders were French, I take it." The two walked on, listening to nothing but the crunching of grass under their feet. After a while, Crawford said, "Teach me something in your language." "What?" asked Wotanok. "Yeah, in case your family ever comes looking for you one day. Maybe I can talk with them." "My family won't come looking for me." "Why not?" "Because they're all dead." "How did your family die?" "They were killed in a raid." "Another tribe raided you?" "That time it was the Comanche. Before that it was the Pawnee. Before that it was the Cheyenne. Next it'll be the Kiowa, or maybe the Americans." "Are your people always at war?" "I came to realize that things never change. We do the sun dance every year, and the Creator brings us spring. The world is new again. But then the plants die and the animals go to sleep. So we do the sun dance again. Change is coming. Change comes, then it goes, and everything remains the same. Not this time. The United States is expanding west. Some say that God has given us all the land from the Atlantic to the Pacific. God doesn't give land to you. You borrow it, and then you die, and then someone else borrows it.
The United States government doesn't see it that way. Crawford let that moment rest before he spoke again. Does that mean you won't teach me anything in your language?
Nei huea in. He no no e eat.
Crawford paused.
Nei hu wo e in. He no e eat.
What does that mean? It means I don't understand Arapaho. What does Wochenok mean? I'm not going to tell you that yet. So you'll tell me one day? Let's get to Fort Leavenworth, then we can discuss it. When a line of cypresses finally broke the horizon, Crawford and Wochenok set their course for the trees. Nestled at the feet of the trees flowed a winding stream surrounded by smooth stones and soft mud. Crawford and Wochenok, weary and parched from 2 days of walking, knelt at the stream and drank. Wochenok washed his face, while Crawford removed his boots and let the water flow between his toes. "Is this the Jabe?" Crawford asked. "To tell you the truth," said Wochenok, "I don't know. I'll have to follow it and see." Wochenok walked to the middle of the creek and sat down, taking the pressure off his injured leg and cooling down. All the miles he put on his knee had not aided in the healing process. "Since there are plenty of trees around," Wochenok said, "why don't you go look for some firewood? I'll take the musket and see if I can do a little hunting." "Leave it. I'll make a snare. It'll be more effective and won't attract any unwanted attention." "With what rope?" "Bark from these trees can be woven for rope." Crawford turned to leave. Before he walked away, he said, "I think that coyote's still out there." "Don't worry. I said earlier it won't attack a man. If a coyote is by itself, it would rather hunt smaller prey." "If you say so," said Crawford, who plunged down the stream in search of dry wood. Wochenok knew he needed to get started on the rope, but the cold stones on the bottom of the creek soothed his leg. After days of walking, a few minutes in the creek were well deserved. While relaxing in the water, he started hearing some quick, light footsteps. He turned his head and saw the coyote, now standing still, staring straight at him. Wochenok thought the coyote was curious, perhaps seeing a man for the first time. Coyotes were hardly ever a threat to adult men. Mothers may have to keep a watchful eye over their children, but men had no such need for caution when a single coyote was near. While his focus locked on the stationary canine, he heard more steps. A second coyote approached, stopping a few feet away from the bank of the creek. Coyotes weren't as effective in teams like wolves, but a second coyote might augment the courage of the first. While one would be skittish, two could be defensive or even aggressive. Wochenok looked for a rifle, which was propped against the tree 20 steps behind him. If he stood up slowly and backed towards it, he would have assurance that he could defend himself. Slowly and cautiously, Wochenok stood up. He took one step back, facing the two coyotes. They didn't move. He took a second step backward. He lifted his right leg and swung back, but when he laid his foot down, it slipped on a muddy stone at the bottom of the creek. His foot slid to the side, twisting his leg in an unnatural position, as his knee took the brunt of the impact. He screamed as pain blasted his knee. The coyotes barked at Wochenok, and he knew he wasn't in a defensible position. He turned and ran towards the musket, pushing through the pain in his leg. He stumbled headfirst after only a few steps, falling onto dry land. The coyotes had run after him. Wochenok felt a stick under his palm, so he grabbed it and turned onto his back. The coyotes were nearly on top of him. Wochenok barely had time to grip the stick with both hands before the canines bit into it. With one coordinated tug, they wrenched the stick from his hands. Wochenok raised his arms to cover his face when he caught the sound of hurried steps, a yell, and cracking wood. Crawford had emerged from the trees and struck one of the coyotes with a stick. The coyote he attacked tucked his tail and ran, while the second backed off from Wochenok by a few feet. That was all Crawford needed as he swung his stick and yelled. A loud crack split the air, and the coyote was thrown to the ground. The other had already fled. Crawford and Wochenok turned to see their musket still resting against a cypress. Then they looked towards the direction of the shot. A man, fully clad in animal furs, stepped out into the open with a smoking musket in his hands. He set it down
then pulled out a flintlock pistol and aimed it at the two travelers.
"Who are you?"
he asked them. "I'm Sergeant Thomas Crawford of the 1st Cavalry Regiment, and this is my companion. We escaped the captivity of the Kaw, and we are seeking our way to Fort Leavenworth."
"Is he Osage?"
"Arapaho," said Wotanok. The man looked at Wotanok, then back at Crawford. The sergeant wondered if he would be able to grab his musket before the man could fire his pistol, but the odds were against him. Crawford would never get the chance. The man put his gun away.
"Why don't you two follow me?" he said.
"I have a cabin about half a mile from here." Oscar McGraw led Crawford and Wotanok to his cabin, which was a 2-hour walk, when the pair of exhausted travelers had 3 healthy knees. The cabin was located 100 yards from the banks of the creek, in the middle of a dense area of pine trees. The inside was modest, with simple furniture, handmade by a man with no carpentry background. McGraw offered his guests a seat and started a fire in his cast-iron stove, as the daylight outside was starting to dim.
"I'll get a pot of coffee started," said McGraw. "I have some cornbread we can eat as well."
As McGraw started preparing the coffee, he apologized to his guests for pointing his pistol at them.
"You never can be too careful when you live out here by yourself. Most of the white folks that venture this way are unsavory, to say the least, and most of the Indians aren't too fond of the white folk. I went over to see where the noise was coming from and found you. I usually don't see people unless I'm going to Missouri to trade my furs."
"We're making our way in that direction," said Crawford. "We were going to follow the creek when we were attacked."
"You're on the right path. This creek flows into the Kansas River. Fort Leavenworth is only a few days' walk from here."
"We're almost there? That's amazing. We've been wandering around for the last few days trying to get back."
"How'd you get lost in Indian territory? What brought you out west?"
"I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, and I was sent out on a search and rescue mission. We ran into Wotanok, who agreed to help us out, but we were attacked by the Kaw. 3 of my men died, and we were captured."
"I can't believe the Kaw would do such a thing," said McGraw. "I interact with them from time to time, but I've never seen them to be this hostile."
"We have," said Wotanok.
"Well, I'm sorry to hear about your troubles. You're both safe here. You can stay with me as long as you need to before you head on your way. If you want to wait a few months, you can even go with me to Independence. I just got back a few days ago, so I don't plan on going back until then."
McGraw removed the percolator and poured 2 cups of coffee for Crawford and Wotanok.
"I'm going to chop some more firewood before it gets too dark,"
he said, as he handed over the coffee.
"I'll be back in a moment. Make yourselves at home while I'm out."
McGraw lit a lantern and carried it outside. "What do you think of him?" Crawford asked.
"I don't know,"
said Wotanok. "Something doesn't feel right."
"What doesn't feel right?"
"I don't exactly know, but I've met trappers like him before. Something doesn't feel right. As far as I'm concerned, as long as there's coffee and cornbread and a roof, it can't all be bad news." They both took a sip, but Wotanok grimaced. "You don't like coffee?" Crawford asked. "Never got the taste for it," said Wotanok. "More for me then," said Crawford. Crawford stood up and took Wotanok's cup, then sat back down. "Look," said Wotanok. "Back there. Don't worry about it," Crawford said. "I heard you scream, so I came running and saw you were fighting off the coyotes. Honestly, I didn't think much of you when we met, but you've shown me that you're more brave than I thought. Don't be getting all soft on me. I only saved your life once." 2 of them laughed. "I'm starting to feel a little cold," said Wotanok. "Can you look for a blanket? I think there's a chest against the wall that might have one." Crawford got up and searched for a blanket for his wounded friend. He found the chest and searched it, and found the blanket. After he gave it to Wotanok, he returned to the chest to close the lid. He glanced inside and saw a cartridge box with a shoulder strap, a flintlock pistol, and a green hat. Crawford picked up and examined the hat. It was pointy with a brim that was flipped up on one side and a rope around the crown. 2 letters were crudely stitched on the inside. H.A.
"Hans Arbach," Crawford said. He turned to Wotanok. This is his hat. Whose? The fellow we were looking for. The German guy with the silly green hat. This must be his. But he was attacked by the Ka, which means... Before Wotanok could finish his thought, the front door opened. McGraw walked in with an armful of firewood. He saw Crawford standing in front of the open chest, holding the hat. I was looking for blankets for my friend, said Crawford. You said we could make ourselves at home. That's all right, said McGraw as he walked inside. Where did you get this hat? Asked Crawford. The previous owner traded it to me. You can keep it if you want. Did you catch the fellow's name? It escapes me at the moment. When did you encounter him? I don't remember exactly. Independence, probably. Why all the interest in this hat? Because the man we were searching for had a hat just like this. He was last seen on the Santa Fe Trail outside Fort Leavenworth. That's right. I was on that trail a few days ago, and I met him there. I thought you said you just got back from Independence a few days ago, said Wotanok. Where did you get this hat? Asked Crawford. Maybe a better question, said Wotanok, is what is your agreement with the Ka? McGraw looked back and forth between the two of them before he sprung into action. He lunged towards Crawford, but the sergeant reached into the chest and grabbed the pistol. He hurled it at McGraw and struck him on the forehead. McGraw toppled to the ground right next to where Wotanok was seated. Wotanok tossed his blanket onto McGraw. As soon as the trapper was able to throw it off, Crawford was prepared to strike. One blow with his fist sent McGraw back to the ground. Crawford grabbed the pistol again and dazed his opponent with one more strike. Crawford ran to the chest and grabbed the cartridge box, then helped Wotanok out of his chair and out the door into the night. How fast can you walk? Asked Crawford. Fast enough, said Wotanok. To the creek. The two ran out of the cabin and wove between the trees to make their way back to the creek. Crawford forged ahead while Wotanok trailed. Crawford heard a snap and a thud. He turned around and looked, but he could barely see. A light approached, and Crawford knew that it was McGraw's lantern. He still couldn't see Wotanok until the lantern shed light on his fallen form. He had stepped into a snare, but McGraw found him first. The trapper cut Wotanok loose, held him up, and put a pistol barrel on his temple. I know you're still out there, McGraw yelled into the night. Get back here or I'll shoot your friend. Go, Crawford, shouted Wotanok. Silence, yelled McGraw. Crawford hid behind a tree and felt the lock of the pistol in his hand. It was loaded. Show yourself, McGraw shouted. Crawford knew the trapper couldn't see him. He took his pistol and aimed at McGraw, using the light from the lantern at his feet. It would be difficult to hit McGraw without hitting Wotanok. Last chance, said McGraw. Go, shouted Wotanok. Silence! Crawford didn't have the shot. If he attempted, the muzzle flash would give away his position, and he probably wouldn't even hit his target. He could just turn and run, and might actually make it to Fort Leavenworth faster without Wotanok slowing him down. Run, Crawford, yelled Wotanok. McGraw threw Wotanok to the ground and aimed his pistol at him. This was Crawford's chance. He squeezed the trigger. Through the smoke, he saw McGraw collapse into the dirt. Crawford rearranged the wood in the fire, creating an area to cook the carp suckers they had just caught. Only a day or two more and we're at Fort Leavenworth, Crawford said. If someone doesn't find us first, said Wotanok. We just escaped from the only white man that would betray us to the Ka, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. I was in such a hurry to escape, I didn't check to see if my shot finished him off. Crawford skewered 2 of the fish and rested them over the fire. We have to assume he's still alive, he said, and that he sent the Ka after us. We have to be prepared to fight. We should stay here, said Wotanok, and defend ourselves from a fortified position. I suggested that a few days ago. You wouldn't hear of it. It was a foolish idea in that situation. It's a foolish idea in this situation, too. When we disagreed, you tried to pull rank on me. You want to try that again? No. I'm just asking you to think about it. We know we're close to our destination. We We don't know how close the Kaw are. It could take them a few days to find us. We need to keep following the Jabe Creek and follow the Kansas River and keep going until we make our way to Fort Leavenworth. Crawford took the fish off the fire and handed one to Wojciech. But whatever we do, we need to do it together. The two of them ate, carefully picking the meat from the bones. The taste and texture of the fish mattered little to Crawford, as the intake of sustenance was a relief in itself. But Crawford wished he had gotten a chance to eat McGraw's cornbread. In a short amount of time, he would be back at the fort. Soon, he would eat all the cornbread he wanted, as well as fresh corn, beans, asparagus, radishes, and rhubarb, in addition to beef, pork, chicken, catfish, bass, and trout. To wash it all down, he could have his choice of coffee, beer, or whiskey. Soon he would be eating in homes and taverns and mess halls, not over a fire, in the middle of hostile territory. He hoped this fish would be his last supper as a fugitive. "You're right," said Wojciech. "We should keep going." "That settles it then. As soon as we're done eating, we'll go east. But we have to prepare for the possibility that we'll have to fight. We're going to be outmatched, so we have to be ready." "What do you propose?" "I think we should stick close to the creek or the river and keep our backs to it. That way, they can only attack in one direction." "You have a keen sense of strategy." "Well, I've been in the Army for 8 years now." "Why did you join?" "We're in an exciting time in history. New things are happening. The future is near. Why not join the Army and be at the front lines of it all?" "That's a great question." "The future is near. America is going west. No doubt I'll be deep in Indian territory again, and sooner rather than later." "That's right. God is giving you this territory." Crawford threw the fish bones into the fire and skewered another carp sucker. He held the fish over the fire. "Do you believe in God?" he asked. "My people believe in the pipe keeper who created the world with the help of a turtle. Not quite the God of the Bible. I met Spanish missionaries years ago. I can't say I like the Catholic Church very much. Then I can't wait to tell you about Methodism." Crawford checked to see if his fish was done, and then took it off the stick and started eating it. "So," he said between bites, "you said you're on your way to independence? What are you going to do when you get there?" "Going to make my way up to Canada," said Wojciech. "That's where I was going when I ran into your team. They're going to abolish slavery. I hope it will be easier there for people who are not white. It might be better there than it will be in my homeland that God is giving to the U.S. You should stay. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I'll tell everyone that you helped me escape from the Kaw, and you'll be rewarded. You could get a job with the Army. You'd be valuable to us." "What job would I get with the Army?" "Scout? Interpreter? I'll find something." "So I can go back west?" "I'm not interested in that. I know what's out west. It's nothing but Comanche raids, steep mountains, and cold winters. I want to see what else the world offers. Where I come from, they say the West is the future. That one day the United States will stretch from sea to sea. I can tell you what's east, farms and cities. You either die from hard labor on a farm or from sickness in the city. Canada is the same, but colder. Trust me, if you want to break free, you're going in the wrong direction." Crawford took a bite of his cooked carp sucker. "I just hope there's better fish than this out west." Wojciech laughed. "Don't worry. Once you go out west, there's trout and salmon in every stream." Crawford stood up and moved wood around the fire. "Are you ready to go?" he asked. "I'll fetch some water and put the fire out, then we should leave." "I'm ready," said Wojciech. "You have your knife and gun?" "I do." "You have your knife?" "Right here." "Good. If we run into enemies, we'll be able to take 3 of them out before we're scalped." They kept marching until long after the sun had faded behind their backs. Guided by the light of the moon and the gurgling of the creek, they stayed eastbound until they could see the red sun of the new morning rising ahead of them. The saunter to the Kansas River had stripped them of their stamina, but they both agreed they needed to keep going, no matter how much their pace slowed.
Not until the sun was high in the cloudless field of sapphire did they rest, mostly on account of Wojciech's knee that screamed to him in pain at increasing volumes. "I understand you're hurting," said Crawford, "but we can only take a few minutes to rest. We may have pursuers on our hands at any moment." "You know," said Wojciech as he sat, "I've seen many herds of buffalo in my homeland." "I'm sure that was breathtaking," said Crawford. "Yes, seeing the buffalo move together as a herd was always spectacular. But at the end, there was always the slow ones, the old, the sick, the injured. Whenever the wolves were hunting the buffalo, they would always go after the slow ones and let the rest of the herd go. It may seem cruel that some would have to become prey because they were slow, but it was for the good of the herd. The herd would become faster and the wolves would leave the other buffalo alone. Sacrifice is never easy, but sometimes it is necessary. So, you see, the way my leg is hurting me, that's alright. Just rest for a few minutes and you'll be able to walk another few miles." As Crawford spoke, he looked out in the direction in which the two had come. "What I'm saying is, look!" Crawford pointed and Wojciech looked in that direction. 3 dark shapes moved along the horizon. As they grew, their forms molded into men on horseback, each approaching rapidly. "Run!" said Crawford. "It's more difficult to shoot a moving target. Start running!" Wojciech got up and started running after Crawford. The sound of his own footsteps soon matched the rhythm of the slowly encompassing sound of horses' hooves. Crawford had moved ahead, now 20 yards in front of the injured native. Wojciech's knee gave out and he stumbled to the ground, crying out. Crawford heard and stopped running. He turned around and saw Wojciech struggling to get back on his feet. A blast split the air in two as Wojciech was hurled towards the earth. Crawford could see 2 of the riders were Indian, but one, who held the smoking musket to his eye, was a white man. The shooter was Oscar McGraw, their treacherous host of a few nights prior. With Wojciech down, the 3 riders set their eyes on Crawford. McGraw reached down and grabbed a pistol. As he brought it up, Crawford raised his own and fired. Blood splattered from McGraw's forehead, and he fell from his horse, only a few feet away from where Wojciech lay. The 2 Kaws approached and fired arrows. One narrowly missed Crawford's feet and the other hit the cartridge box that was strapped at his hip. With his pistol spent, the 2 riders on horseback quickly rode up to Crawford and stopped. They had their bows drawn, ready to fire arrows at the sergeant. Crawford heard a shout in a foreign language. The Kaw heard it too and turned to see Wojciech propped up on his elbows, yelling something at them. Crawford, capitalizing off the distraction, grabbed the rider closest to him and pulled him off his horse. The other rider turned to shoot Crawford, but the sudden motion spooked his horse, and the arrow sailed high. Crawford grabbed his knife, and as he grappled with the warrior in his grasp, he stabbed him in the neck. He then rolled over so that the Kaw was atop of him, as the other one fired another arrow. The shaft was buried in the back of the fallen Kaw's ribcage. The archer dismounted and strode towards Crawford. He grabbed his companion's body and flung it off of Crawford, who was now lying on his back. The Kaw had a clean shot, and Crawford had nowhere to go. A resounding clap rang out, and Crawford's Kaw adversary fell to the ground. Crawford looked to where the shot was fired, and saw Wojciech lying behind McGraw's corpse, holding McGraw's pistol. Crawford got up and ran over to him. Wojciech had been shot in the left clavicle. Not a harmless blow, but certainly not an immediate death sentence. "How are you feeling?" asked Crawford. "Do you want me to answer honestly? Can you walk?" "Not very far or for very long." Only a few yards upstream, one of the Kaw's horses, who had initially been spooked by the gunfire, had settled on the banks of the stream. Crawford slowly approached the drinking horse and gently mounted it. He rode over to Wojciech and threw him across the horse's loin. He himself rode on the back and commanded the horse into a gallop. "We escaped! We're free!" said Crawford. "Now we just need to get you to a doctor." "That was only a scouting party. More are coming." No, we fought them off." "More are coming." They rode on as fast as the horse would carry them, following the banks of the creek. Crawford pushed the horse, knowing that Wojciech would succumb to his wounds, and that the enemies could catch them if they still pursued. "Stop!" Wojciech suddenly cried. "No," said Crawford. "We have to keep going. Stop!" Crawford didn't respond or grant the request. Wojciech rolled off the back of the horse and slammed into the ground. Only then did Crawford stop. He dismounted next to a white ash tree and ran to Wojciech. "What are you doing?" "The weak buffalo are going to die anyways. Maybe they can fight off the wolves and save the rest of the herd." "What are you saying?" "Give me a gun. I'll hold them off as you go." "No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to put you back on that horse and we're going to get to Fort Leavenworth." "I won't make it. Give me a gun." "I won't hear of it." Wojciech grabbed his knife and held it to his own throat. "Then I'll kill myself right here and right now. Either way, you're going without me." "You sound like a lunatic." "I'll do it." Crawford took a second to think before finally making up his mind. "Let me take you over to that tree," he said. Crawford helped his friend limp to the ash tree and propped him up on his back. He then loaded the pistol he stole from McGraw's cabin, and the pistol Wojciech took off McGraw's corpse. He handed the guns to Wojciech. "There's still time to change your mind," Crawford said. "You keep asking me what my name means," Wojciech said. "You said you were named after your father." "That's right. Wojciech means black bear." "Come with me." Wojciech pointed the pistol at Crawford. "Go now or I'll shoot." Crawford took out his knife and carved B.B. into the tree. "If you survive," he said, "stay here. I'll find you. I'll look for this carving. I'll bring a whole regiment with me if I have to, but I'll find you. Go. Get to Fort Leavenworth." Crawford got on his horse and galloped away. Crawford has pushed his horse as fast as it would go, which by now was only a slow trot. Had he heard gunshots? He had been out of earshot for hours now, maybe even a day. Was Wojciech able to fire off 2 rounds? Did the Indians get to him first? Or did he expire before he even got the chance? As his horse was panting, Crawford desperately fought to keep his eyes open. His back was slouched, and he needed to use his hands to steady himself on his horse. He barely caught the sound of a rushing river as the Jabe Creek joined the Kansas River. The last stage of his journey ran in front of him like the pillar of cloud leading to the promised land. His strength gave out and he toppled off the top of his horse. The steed walked towards the banks of the river to lap the rushing water. Crawford remained on the ground, letting the earth support his exhausted limbs. Perhaps the cause had forgotten about him. Maybe, by some miracle, Wojciech had successfully fought them off. Crawford could at least close his eyes and forget about the tribulations for just a minute or two. No sooner did his eyelids close than he heard the sounds of horses' hooves. In an instant, Crawford had gone from debilitating exhaustion to a state of high alert. He felt for his knife, the last weapon he had. He heard the hooves reach his position and then stop. In one motion, Crawford stood and turned to face the mounted force, holding his knife in front of him. With one glimpse, he threw his knife to the ground and raised his hands above his head. "Don't shoot!" he said. Opposite from Crawford stood a platoon of blue-coated soldiers. "Don't shoot! I'm Thomas Crawford of the 1st Cavalry Regiment." One of the soldiers dismounted and approached Crawford. "You're Sergeant Crawford?" he asked. "Yes." The soldier extended his hand to Crawford. "I'm Lieutenant John Masterson. Half the Army's looking for you." Crawford shook the lieutenant's hand. "Let's get you home."